Welcome back to the Tuesday Weekend, the podcast for those of us who are very good about taking care of other people and not so great about taking care of ourselves. We're trying to get better about that. One of the underlying issues that we've touched on but haven't really gotten to yet is actually the low pay that comes with a lot of positions in the service industry. And with the low pay come a variety of other issues as well. For one fact, culinary school loans have among the highest default rates by their borrowers of any kind of student loan. But there are broadly two issues that affect people's daily lives when it comes to low pay, and that is childcare and affordable housing. If you are trying to raise a child and working in a restaurant, there will be times when you are at work and the child is not at school. So if you don't have a spouse or parent or sibling to watch them, that probably means you are going to pay someone else for it. If you have a couple of kids, you can easily have a slow night where the childcare costs more than what you bring in that day. And furthermore, most places in this country right now, there is a stark imbalance between median pay and housing costs. And I will say this from both first and second-hand experience, that if you have to maintain 2 or 3 jobs just to pay rent, you are not in a mentally healthy place. So what can be done? Is it on our communities? Is it on our local governments? Is it on our employers to make sure that what we earn affords us an actual living in those places that we live? Deanna, I'm going to start with you. Like living wages.
Sure. So I think a lot of times we don't really understand what a living wage is. So just briefly kind of explain what I think it means. We have a minimum wage, and the minimum wage actually has been increasing across the country. So that's a positive thing, but it's not increasing at the same rate as inflation or as the expense that that you outlined, and not just housing, but food and everything else as well, right? And so the idea of a living wage is based upon the community where the company is, and it's a living wage that somebody could live in that community. And the idea here, and again, I throw this to a resort community, but it's not just about resorts. It's certainly a challenge anywhere. But for example, I think Nick, you mentioned driving up the canyon. You know, if your employees don't work in your community, even if it's 45 minutes away in the next biggest city, that's fantastic that there is some options for more affordable housing, but they're going to be on the road. They're going to be contributing to traffic. They're going to get stuck. They're going to be snow days when they can't make it. And then not only that, but they're going to be leaving after work to go back to that place. So, you know,
and get pulled over all the time.
Right.
It's after 2 a.m. in Utah.
Right. Exactly. And so it's a really complex thing. And so the question about, you know, and it's a pretty significant question. I certainly am not the person with the end all be all answer, but is it on the communities, the governments, our employers? I mean, yes, right? Yes, it's for everybody, because if you don't have workforce, it is the company's problem. But at the same time, it's the community's problems. They're not going to have the depth of restaurants to be open because they can't find staff. And I know this is happening. It's been escalated because of COVID, but it blows my mind. McDonald's as an example, right? Like I'm now in a rural community, and I had to drive 45 minutes to town, and I was driving on a major highway that had McDonald's on the way, right? 4 McDonald's. It was 9:30 on a Friday night, and none of them were open. And they were also off the interstate, like off of a highway that people are traveling, right? Like, and they're driving. And I don't know, I feel conflicted saying this, but I mean, people need to eat, right? And the reality is when you're traveling, the only option is a McDonald's type place, right? Like there's not a whole lot of other options. So it's unreal to be like, these places are not open. And it's like, oh, well, they can't get employees. And then you start bidding the idea that it's the employee's fault, like that they don't want to come in to work. Well, they don't want to come into work because of all those issues you outlined, like childcare, like gas money, like not, you know, having to drive 45 minutes, whatever, right? Like it becomes just a very complex issue. But advocating for living wages, I think, is really a place that employees can come together and say, like, no, minimum wage is not enough. Like it's not enough to be able to, yeah, I can put together 3 jobs at minimum wage and pay rent, but that means I don't have any time to do anything, right? Like that's not mentally healthy.
Now, that being said, I live in one of the top 3 most expensive cities in the world, or at least in America, where we have minimum wage. Most countries don't have minimum wage. They just pay you properly. But we have a high minimum wage here. Our minimum wage is $16.70 an hour. And everyone's like, that's so much money. And I'm like, where you're from? Yeah, that's a ton of money if I'm back in Utah, or that's a ton of money, out in Iowa or something. But out here, they do a map every year and it shows what minimum wage should be in every state in order to live, in order to pay your rent, in order to buy food. And minimum wage in California, even though we get 16 an hour, would be right around 30 bucks an hour, would be a livable minimum wage in California. Now, you take that, and then I look at my tips. I keep track of my tips every night. All of you bartenders and servers out there, keep a tip log. It's really important, especially when you get that random audit when someone at your restaurant screws up and they decide to audit all of you. Like, here's what I made. That's what's claimed on my W-2. I'm good. But when I go through my tip log, it tells how much I make hourly when I put in what my tips are. There's always nights like last night, I did really well for how god awful slow it was. I mean, I did exceptionally well, but over that time, I didn't hit 30 bucks an hour. There's nights like that. And when you talk about the stresses of the job and the scheduling, back of the house, you need your hours. Front of the house, I need my own hours. Like this week, we're starting a new bartender on Friday and Saturday. That means she is taking half of my shift. I do not need another bartender on this shift. Now I'm looking at the prospects of taking my 2 busiest nights and splitting tips. Hey, it's great to make $300 to $500 a night. It's fantastic. I do that. Now I'm looking at making $150 a night on the same shift. That's a problem. That's a stressor for me. That's something that's going to bother me. And I've already told my bosses, like, this is not a good idea for me. If I'm making the same money on a Friday night, I can make it at Chili's in Chula Vista on a Tuesday day. I'm not working here. And that's part of the industry problem is like a lot of managers think that I call it the whiskey rebellion option. Is like, I'm just going to throw a ton of people at the problem. Oh, the bar's busy. Let's put 4 more bartenders on. It's like, just get better people.
Let me counter that with something I'm dealing with as a manager. I had in the first 5 weeks that I've been managing this restaurant, an average of 2 or 3 call outs every week. So I put another part-timer on because I need to cover my floor. And now, sure, I'm looking at a schedule the next couple of weeks. I will have 7 servers all wanting to work Friday and Saturday night, and I only have 5 people on the floor. I only need 5 people on the floor. Yeah. If I divide it into 6, then everyone's going to get 3 tables and get real mad at me because they made no money. Yeah. But at the same time, I've had the call outs. I've had a couple of nights where I have stood there looking at the floor thinking, if I had 1 more server right now, I would like the problem wouldn't be mine. It's a difficult balance because I want to try to please as many guests as I can without overwhelming the kitchen. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that the tables as they are seated, that is all of the income that my servers are making. I mean, sure, they do make an hourly also. They can stand around and clean the soda machine, and they will still make something at the end of the night. It is not, the $2.35 an hour, but
I've been in that situation. I've been the manager in that situation. I was running a bar, and I had everybody scheduled 4 shifts a week. And they were all super angry at me because they were only working 4 shifts a week. And I'm like, so they went above my head to the owner, and they was like, you got to schedule everybody 5 shifts a week. And I'm like, all right, but we're going to do it for a month. You're going to see why I do this. And sure enough, as soon as I go to 5 shifts a week, people are like, I want to be cut. People are calling out all the time. I'm like, for a month, I'm like, look, people aren't even working their 5 shifts a week. It's too much. They don't want to do it. In their head, they're like, I want that money. But at the same time, they don't want to be here. So I put them back to 4 shifts a week. Sure. Didn't hear a word about it after that.
I have a sincere feeling that this will all work itself out within a couple of weeks. Also, scheduling, actually, as a manager, I'll take that a step back. When I was a chef, probably my least favorite aspect of that job was actually having to do the schedule every week, especially knowing that I was always trying to get it up on Thursday. So don't come to me Friday morning saying, hey, I need next Tuesday and Wednesday off, because now that destroys everything. But also, as a manager, I've got a number of students on my staff right now. I've got a couple of regulars who expect their 5 shifts a week. I've got, it is a balancing act.
It really is.
I try to be flexible with especially my students' schedules, because I know, hey, sometimes they have that big project coming up and they actually sincerely need that weekend off. I want to be able to give it to them as often as I can, but it's also, you know, there's work to be done and I can't do it with nobody here.
When I was doing schedules, anytime I was running a place, I would actually do a monthly schedule. Here's a schedule for the next month. Oh, I need that Tuesday off. You got 3 weeks to get it covered.
Well, and
you know, it made it a lot easier.
I do. I, again, understand that all of us have lives outside of work that need to be attended to.
Oh,
I
believe me,
certainly do.
I know.
And I do not feel any guilt taking PTO. Like, I mean, in fact, I'm kind of, with my trip to Colorado this weekend, leaving them holding a little bit of a bag of shit, but it's also not entirely my doing, and I'm setting them up as well as I can. The previous manager to me, for some reason, in my dining room with only 75 chairs in it, agreed to have a wedding reception for 30 people. And that's bad for my servers. That's bad for the kitchen. It should have been a banquet event. And in fact, I'm going to make it that. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So let's get on to the next thing I want to talk about: chemical coping mechanisms. Especially when I worked in Park City, I used to joke quite a bit. You have alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, or weed. Pick at least 2 to start your day. And a lot of my coworkers
we're talking Park City where it snows year round.
Oh, sure.
Let's be honest.
Oh, sure. Up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, that's probably just alcohol. One of the chefs I used to work for in New York frequently liked to say, "I'm too sober for this shit right now." Until one day when one of the sous chefs said, "Really, chef, is that true?" And the kitchen got real quiet for a minute. A February 2023 report from SAMHSA, and we'll get back to them in a minute, says that the service industry has the highest risk of substance abuse issues, with a full 17% diagnosed with a substance abuse issue. And of course, let's put a circle around the word diagnosed in that sentence there.
I'm like,
and of course, the correlation and causality here is very complex. But all those substance abuse issues can be hard on not just the individual, but their team and their boss. There's a former coworker I want to introduce to you, Party Phil. I do not know if he chose that name for himself or if that was a nickname that just stuck to him, but he would introduce himself to you as Party Phil. He was a morning prep cook at the ski resort and a regular at the clubs on Main Street. There was one night at the Epic Club where he had gotten up at the stage, kind of was boogieing with the DJ for a bit, and then unexpectedly tried to body surf the crowd. So jumps out and the crowd parts. And he went,
I remember that guy.
Yeah. He went headfirst into the concrete floor.
Yeah.
And was
I remember that guy.
Bleeding from the head. Was like, no, I'm fine. He didn't want to stop dancing. And
we were like, no, you have to leave.
You have to, we got to go to,
to a hospital.
My roommate Tim and I ended up carrying him back up the hill that night because we lived the closest. But but that's not even my favorite story about Party Phil. So there was one morning about 10 a.m. I come into the kitchen and Phil is there prepping boxes of produce for the day. And I say, "Morning, Phil. How you doing?" And he looks over at me, eyes barely open, is like, "Have you ever seen fruits and vegetables dance in the walk-in before? Because that's where I'm at right now." And I just look at him and like, "All right, Phil, you play safe with that knife now." And he smiles back like, "You know it, dude." Anyway,
I remember that guy.
he got fired before the end of the season, but decided to join the Navy. And a couple of months later was court-martialed when his CO found a dozen tabs of acid in his bunk. Yeah, Party Phil, wherever you are, I hope you're having a good time, man.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure he is.
Okay, and sure, not every person in the kitchen who likes drugs follows Party Phil's have a good time all the time kind of mentality. And I have absolutely worked with my fair share of high-functioning stoners that do work just fine high and actually get a little cranky when they're sober. And again, there are plenty of times at work where I think this is why we drink. I mean, it's been a while since I've worked at a place that allows a shift drink at the end of the night, but I like the idea overall.
Everyone gets a shift drink.
Everyone gets
the last place down.
That last place in New York that I worked, we would get a shift drink at the end of the night. And there was one morning, I remember it was the manager, the bartender, and me at the bar. And I look out the window, it's like, hey guys, is the sky getting light? And that's when we decided to go home.
Man, I worked in a bar where we were allowed to drink after work. It was even in Utah. The whole staff we'd close the bar down, get everything done. No one would touch anything. Everyone's done. Like the kitchen, everyone's all done. Great. Pour drinks. Go sit down. You're gonna laugh in the waiting line by 07 on the jukebox, and the whole staff would sit there sipping a drink and not say a word through that entire song. And as soon as the song was over, then we'd start venting about the night. But there was just that one 3-minute and 47-second part where we would just sit and sip and just be like, and then go from there. The substance thing, lots and lots of drinking, seen that all the time everywhere. There's always the sign that I wasn't going to drink tonight, and then I worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wasn't planning on going out tonight, and at the end of the shift, I'm like, I'm definitely going out tonight. The one that you're kind of leaving off here, and this is a bigger one that I've seen a lot, especially in the bar industry, is cocaine.
Oh, yes.
You would not believe. I had a friend out here visiting, and she's a civilian, and she's just like, oh, I started doing coke. And I'm like, what? She's like, can you get me some? I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
She's like, well, do you know where to get some? I'm like, of course I do. I'm a bartender, but no. She's like, you wouldn't believe how many of our friends do cocaine. I'm like, yes, I would. Like when I worked at a bar up in Park City, I worked at one of the nightclubs. We were always horsing around. We were always doing stuff. There was always like water games and all that. You did not throw water at the back of anyone because everyone kept their coke in their back pocket.
Yeah.
Like, no, it was like, hey, put a knife to your throat, serious. Don't you ever do that again. It's like, all right.
You just cost me a lot of money, man.
I mean, dude, I've lost jobs because I don't do lines with the owner. It's not my thing. I'm not into it. I don't care about it.
No, personally, that is one expensive habit I am glad I do not have.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, so many people all the time just like, I'd shake my head like Lee Trevino. I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
But
you just spent half your tips on 1 second. Yeah. Good job.
Oh, geez. Exactly. Whatever.
But dude,
there are all sorts of reasons why I don't cook. But
I mean, it's so prevalent in our industry.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Top to bottom.
I know. I'm just going to bring in the buzzkill portion of this segment, I think, but I think, Nick, you're hitting upon it, but I think it's important, right? Like, it's all fun and games until you're addicted, right? And it's especially cocaine, right? Like, it's so easy to just try it once or twice, and then it's really something that you feel like you need to be doing all the time. And by nature, especially the bars, right? Like, some restaurants maybe don't have this culture quite as much, or even you think the coffee shop, but that's not true, right? Yeah. By nature of the service industry, you know, it is a party culture, and we want everyone to have a good time. And there's drugs and substances that do come along with that. And I think that when we work in that space, we have to kind of recognize and know our own limits, know when we're in too far, and how we want to get out. And I think we're not there today, right? Like we're not there today as our society. But I would say it's really how can we take on the, you know, maybe I'm just not drinking tonight. I'm not saying you don't have to drink. I'm just saying, you know, it's okay for people to not drink, right? Like, and I think what happens is there's a lot of, why don't you want to have a shift drink? Oh my gosh, you know, and you can't be included unless you're going to be drinking with us or doing coke with us. I mean, Nick, you brought up being fired over, you know, not being trusted. And I think that's kind of up to us in the industry to kind of shift that narrative. So it's a place where, you know, whatever your style is, at least for our patrons, right? Like whatever that is, we're not going to condone it, but we don't pressure you into it. And for other people that we work with, I think something that's really worth noting, right? How difficult it might be to get sober when you're working in this environment. And a lot of people have grown up in this environment, so they don't have any transferable skills. They haven't figured out what another type of job they might be able to have. And so they could be in active recovery, but not feel like they have another way to make income. And not only that, but sometimes their significant other, their spouse is still in the scene, or their roommates, right? And so not only are they going to work in this environment, they're also going home and being surrounded. And so you have to remember that these people, you know, they need a support network. They have to replace that activity in that environment with something. And so just being a kind of a supportive space for that, and allowing people to get clean if that's what they are choosing to do, whether they've decided or someone's decided for them that that's what they have to do. I think we have a little bit of onus in that space. Is not.
And I've never been tolerant of people who, when your buddy says, hey, I need to quit drinking, and you've got, oh, you want to drink. I'm like, dude, they don't want to drink. Back off. And they're like, oh, yo, I'm like, they don't want to drink. Let it go. There's always the people, the peer pressure. Oh, you want to drink, because a lot of people want that person to drink with them. They want them to be drunk. It's fun for them. I see it all the time when there's someone just going like, I don't want to, hey, we want 3 shots. I don't want one. Okay, here you go. And they're like, you didn't get him a shot. I'm like, well, he said he didn't want one. Oh, he wants one. I'm like, he said he didn't want one. He's not getting one. If you say he wants one, you're not getting one either. You're cut off. And they're just like, I'm like, you don't make these decisions for other people, but there's always that huge amount of peer pressure anytime you're out. I mean, for me personally, I drink socially. I probably have 2 or 3 drinks a month at home. If I'm going to have a drink, I'm at a bar sitting next to someone. I'm going to be at a restaurant. I don't like to sit and drink and watch TV. In my earlier years, I have done that, and it's just very self-destructive. That being said, there's nights when I get off work, it's like, I really need a drink. And at the same time, I'm like, not in the mood you're in. It's not a good idea. Just go home. And I'll just go home. It usually works a bit better for me personally. But all of these things we're talking about are on how that person is, how they feel about themselves. If you like doing coke, you like doing coke. If you like doing shots, you like doing shots. Just, you can do your thing. It's when there's a bleed over into work or a bleed over in society that like, hey, you're drunk all the time, or you're showing up to work drunk, or you walk in like high as a kite, coked out, and it's just like, you think you're fine. You think you're great. Everyone you work with is going like, wow, this is going to be a shit show tonight. So, I mean, you just notice that. And like Josh said, I can't smoke weed and work. There's no way in hell. I lose all hand-eye coordination. When I'm sober, I'm one of the best in the planet on it. But if I'm stoned, I'm breaking 3 glasses every 5 minutes. But I've had coworkers who would go out and smoke one down and come back in and bartend lights out. The personal thing, how you feel about it, what you do. And when you get like to the cocaine or the alcohol and stuff, instead of doing cocaine or instead of going out for a drink, you need a drink. You have to use cocaine. You need that to get through the day. I think it's that part that people really gloss over. That's when you start making the excuses, when you start rationalizing, oh, it's cool, I'm going out to the bar drinking with my friends and stuff. It's like, yeah, but you're spending $90 a night at the bar.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not drinking at the bar, you're drinking the bar.
Well,
yeah. And I would also just slightly contend, maybe for it to consider. I think that it is getting somewhat better, but we've created these cultures, right? Where I do think probably someone maybe with less experience or a little bit more immature, but they show up and they think that, you know, I'm going to be a bartender and we're going to drink all night. Like, I think there's a little bit of like onus to that, right? Like, I would not concur that people perform better at work of any type of job inebriated, right? Like, I just really wouldn't say that they might be fun, good time until they're not, right? And I think I'm not saying there's zero tolerance or that. I'm not like that prudish, but I would say that there is that recognition, like, right? Like, and this is more from the managerial standpoint, but, you know, like, hey, like, that's not the tone here. Like, that's not how we do things. And so, you know, recognizing that we're not condoning this culture of showing up and doing the job in that way, right? Like, I think there's a line, right? And I just kind of would contend that.
Well, and you're hitting the nail on the head right there. So in this industry, there's things called wet bars. There's dry bars, there's wet bars. That's the industry name for them, not the public name for them. Dry bars, you don't drink. I work at a dry bar. I work at Marriott, not drinking behind the bar. A lot of the private owned bars, they can have shots and stuff. I will say also that every wet bar I know of is a dry bar at least 3 months a year, because there'll be that one shift, that one day when the whole staff kind of goes overboard. There's a place I go to right now that they are a wet bar, but they're not drinking right now. And it's telling on some of the staff. I've been in bars where they've been doing shots and drinking. There was one that was a wet bar and then they went dry for a couple months. On Super Bowl Sunday, I was at the bar talking to the bartender, and then 2 days later, I'm like, hey, you want to do a shot? And they're like, no, we're a dry bar now. I'm like, oh, is it from Sunday? And they're all, yeah, you guys were into it. And it's like, oh yeah, well, I know. And I'm like, yeah, you talked to me for 4 hours. I was there. He's like, you were even there? And I'm like, that's how drunk you guys were. You don't even remember me being there. I mean, and you can watch it. They'll do a shot or two a shift. That's about it. A couple weeks later, they've got a beer behind the bar. They're doing 4 or 5 shots a shift, and it just goes up, and then it explodes, and then they get reset back down to 0.
You're not paying to drink that night. You're being paid. And so I think there's like this level of professionalism, right? like, we need you to, you're the sober monitors. You're making sure we're not out of control. in a way that, you know, you guys can help us prevent, right? Personally, as a patron, right? Like I kind of pay for that. Like that's why I'm here at a bar, not drinking at home, right? Like maybe I feel like I want.
And the responsible bartenders in that place would be like, hey, you want a shot? And they're like, oh no, I just did one. I'm good. But the other bartenders are like, I see them do a shot and then, hey, you want a shot? Sure. And then they do another. They do like 3 or 4 shots in 5 minutes. And I'm just like, man, I can throw down drinks and dude, you're going to feel that in about 10 minutes and not be able to pour a beer. And you can just watch them go down that slope. And you're just like, and if that's when I'm like, I need to tab out.
I just also want to say, like, you know, again, I've worked quite a bit in like more of office environments as well. And I've had similar situations, right? Like you go to a networking event and you're there on work time, and I've done it myself, honestly, and I'm mortified, right? Like, and that's probably some coming of age, like learning exactly what my tolerance is and what I should be doing, and you know how to drink water for every drink I have or whatever. But like it really, like I said, it shouldn't be tolerated. Just because you're there with an open bar on work time does not mean that you should take full advantage of the open bar. You were there to work, and you need to do what's happening, you know, what the moment is called for. And it can be really challenging. It can be really challenging for people to figure out if they've not been in that environment before. So
when you go out drinking, you don't intend to have 3, 4 drinks. You just do. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go out and have a couple of drinks. Some people like, I'm having 2 drinks and going home. Most people are, I'm going to go out and have a couple of drinks, and then it's 8 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, it's 12 o'clock. Now, picture that if it's free.
Right.
You can turn around and pour whatever you want. And guess what? You're super good at making those drinks. It's like Josh said on another episode about how the kitchen is. I mean, he's like, you make some of the best food in the kitchen that's not on the menu because you know what you're doing. Same thing for shots and stuff. You're having a great time, but then you're having too great of a time.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to get back to just very briefly supporting coworkers who are trying to break out of that cycle, who are trying to either get or stay clean. And I'm going to put the onus here on the sous chefs and the assistant managers, because in my opinion, those are really the camp counselor positions. Like it is on you as a sous chef to make sure all of your cooks have what they need. And that includes, you know, like the food they need to prep, but also are mentally okay for that day. And again, you know, manager, assistant manager, all right, not every restaurant has assistant managers, but you're the ringleader. You're the leader of that group. So it's up to you to take time with all of your staff to check in with them on occasion, and especially those days where they are apparently behaviorally different than the rest of the time. Because, yeah, usually there will be some sign. Okay, let us take one more break here, and then we're going to get back to just talking about getting help, because there are a lot of resources, and we definitely want to get into that. So thank you for sticking with us to this point. Absolutely leave us a like and some comments, and tell your friends about it.